One.
Okay, calling to order the Joint Committee on Ways and Means and Finance. This afternoon, we're here from the 4 county mayors who will present their legislative packages. So we'll begin with the City and County of Honolulu, Mayor Blanchiardi. Good afternoon.
Hi, Chair. Could you please turn on your podium mic?
Asking? You guys cannot hear.
Okay, we can hear now. But
There we go. Should I say good afternoon all over again? I'm happy to do that. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you heard what I said at the end. I'm here with Mike Formby and Krishna and Sam and Kevin. And I was going to say that before I say anything at all, I just want to tell you that 2 years into this job, I'm really excited and very confident about what's going to happen. And that's primarily driven by the quality of the men and women on our team. You know, when we put together our cabinet in the fall of 2020, it was a pretty difficult period of time. And the men and women who came forward at that time was very humbling for me. It's my first time in office. And since that time, we've had to make very few adjustments to our team. We've made a couple of critical changes in our directors and deputy directors. But for the most part, there's a team now that's worked through some real difficulty the last couple of years. And I think that our priorities and our ambitions are reflected in what we've already submitted to you, and you understand that. And we'll be following up with that in committee and discussions. But I just want you to know, as I listened to Governor Green talk about this morning with respect to a new governor and his people coming in, I feel that 2 years into it and the potential for alignment with the state is unprecedented, given the cooperation that we have with our team. So I just want to set that. And I could talk a lot more about that, but it's a good feeling to have. So let me just, lots been talked about over the years. We've made a commitment to ourselves that we're not going to be those people that talked about affordable housing during the campaign and came into office and never did anything about it and then talked about it again when they were seeking re-election. So we are expecting a lot of great collaboration with the state. In that regard, the city is now back into the private activity bonds. We've used our allocation from 2020. We're working very closely with HHFDC, Denise Matsubara, and we're ready to go with that. And we think that that's going to be a really good stimulus. We've adopted all of our rules. I would tell you the thing that keeps me up at night for everything I just said is one of our key departments is the rebuilding of DPP. You know, we knew what we inherited. There'd been an audit done. Everybody knew it. It still is a real challenge for us. But I believe strongly in our leadership. I believe strongly in the value of the investments we've been able to make in there thus far in technology, what we're doing in people, what we're doing in our reorganization and restructuring. We're pushing for self-certification. We're doing a lot of other things like that that we think are really going to be very favorable. Our government assistance program, which was Bill 7, which has now evolved into Bill 1, is beginning to get some real traction. We're asking for some help for that. I'm looking forward. I've not read the emergency proclamation yet. What's intended, but we think that that's going to help us let go of some of the things that have really gotten in the way of actually being able to get the kinds of things done. I think one of the things we're really looking at now that we've got rail in a good place, and I'll talk about that in a minute, is TOD and the regional infrastructure planning, which is something we think the city does best. So I think more than anything, we've looked for, and for me, it was a real challenge to figure out what does the city really do? What is its role in affordable housing? We don't have a building unit to send people out into the field. But now that I think we've got a good understanding of where we're going and making strategic acquisitions, the Waikiki Vista was just one. There are other things we're working on now that we think we can develop according to the color of money. That's what we're trying to get regulated right now, and from the standpoint of allowing us to do with those properties that we think will be in the best interest of the public. So I think affordable housing for us, and hearing everything that the governor said, is now our number one top priority. And it has been. Probably a good segue to public safety. One of the things that we've really worked hard on is a really good working relationship with Steve Arm, our prosecuting attorney, and our new chief of police, Joe Logan. I think you've seen us probably in a number of sessions together between the Weed and Seed program and Safe and Sound in Waikiki. We've made some headway. We've gotten some great cooperation from the judiciary, quite honestly, with geographic restrictions. Our biggest challenge right now is on enforcement. And so I think we've made some really good inroads in Chinatown. Waikiki still remains a major challenge for us. I can tell you, in talking with Chief Logan, that we probably have more police presence in Waikiki, despite some of the things that we've had before, between patrol officers, people in cars, undercover, and narcotics, but we still have issues to deal with down there. There's just a lot of lurkers down there, people just with long rap sheets. And what we're looking to do is quite honestly, is to not only keep them out of Waikiki, but anybody we can incarcerate. I come down on that side of it if they're committing, felonies against people. And so it's about enforcement. Quite honestly, as you know, we're trying to rebuild our police department. We need more police officers. That's not meant to be an excuse, but public safety is a top of mind project for me. Affordable housing is probably from the standpoint of what we're trying to get done, understanding the absolute critical need of that, but they're both interrelated, which I think you can appreciate. Our homelessness program, I'm really proud of. It's, somewhat early in its design, but I came into office talking about that. It was probably the primary motivator for me to make this decision to run for mayor. And, what we're doing with our core program and what we're beginning to see, just last week, we did the opening of the H4 project, which was something we worked on before I was here, but we have our clinic on Hawai'i Street that we'll be doing a press conference on probably next week. But what we've done with the core program, which is modeled after probably some of the best programs in the country. We look at what was being done in Boston, what was being done in Denver, and being done in Houston, and our core program really works with that. The project we're going to open up at Hawai'i Street is going to be in concert with Japson, first time ever. It's going to have for us 8 beds in there, but more than anything, it allows us to give the kind of treatment we need to give to our mentally addicted, drug addicted, and mentally ill people. Programs that are ahead of us have been at it for a while. We've got a core of 28 people. We've got a couple of ambulances, but more than anything, we've got a great leader in Jim Ireland, Dr. Jim Ireland, in charge of EMS, and with some great cooperation with Anton Krucky and the other people that we're working with. I have a lot of confidence that we're going to make some real strong inroads. I don't believe the police should be the tip of the spear in dealing with the homeless situation, and they're not. I think the cost savings alone, and the governor alluded to a little bit this morning, just on what we're doing to the hospitals, and quite honestly, to the city and county, is going to be dramatic. It's just going to take us a while. As you heard today, our homeless numbers seem to grow no matter what we're up against and what we're doing, but we're trying to mitigate that as much as possible in the right way. One of the things that nobody talked about during the campaign that really became very obvious to me going into office was the fact that we had so many vacancies. We had over 3,000 vacancies in the city and county. We began to take a look at that. We did all the diagnostics and try to figure out, it took 180 days to have anybody get employed. We had 3,000 vacancies, really compromises the quality of the leadership team that we've put in place. We don't need all 3,000 of those jobs, but we probably need a couple of thousand of them. Probably 2,000 of those go to 5 departments alone, very labor intensive departments that, quite honestly, are the ones that deliver on core city services. So we're working on our staffing and vacancies. I think we've really gone to work on the hiring processes and practice. The city itself, candidly speaking, wasn't in the business of recruiting personnel. In fact, it took 180 days, but you can't run an organization of 10,000 people and not really have a recruiting arm, or for that matter, not really have in it training and retention into your budget, your operating to keep good people. And on top of that, the thing that was really painful to discover was the fact there was no succession planning. So we take that and you add to that the fact that this is a very difficult job market right now to be increasing people. But nonetheless, we're out there and we've begun to recruit. There's an old adage I learned a long time ago that people go where they're invited. And so the city is just being a lot more aggressive that way. We're really pleased to have Forbes committee, and they did their employee surveys, which we had nothing to do with, and city and county people who do work there. And this is the thing that's so humbling for me and so heartening at the same time, is they're very proud of where they work. And so we were named the #2 employer in the state #1 government agency next to Hawaiian Airlines. I took that as a really great base to work with. But, it seems never ending how many people are retiring and what we're up against and trying to hire just to keep a status quo. So we've got our work cut out with us along with trying to build our police department. Transportation. I can tell you that coming into office under the circumstances in January of 21, we're just prior having the CEO of the rail project removed, having P3 pulled, which was basis of financing, and announced overruns of $3.67 billion in the middle of a pandemic was daunting to say the least. And then in the process, in my early on discussions with the outgoing FTA administrator and then the incoming FTA administrator, trying to understand why the FTA, who was our construction partner, hadn't given us any money since 2017, it was a real mess. So despite the fact we've been in this pandemic, I'm extremely proud of the work. And I have Mike Formby and Colleen Hanabusa, chair of the hard board, and our team here, what we've been able to do. And so we modified phase one. We came to a phase one concept. We've got the FTA to approve our recovery plan. We've got the FTA to agree to come back and grant us money. And so we're going to build an 18.75 mile rail system, which really satisfies as a fully functional rail system as phase one, which would take us through the 3 large employment centers at the Pearl Harbor, the airport, and obviously downtown. But we're going to go to work very quickly on phase two and to see how that maps itself out. I think that phase two is going to go at a minimum to Ala Moana. While we have not done the drawings or ever, I mean, in the beginning, it was always set to go to the University of Hawaii, which would make great sense for all the feasibility of that. But I also believe that we need to go from where we are right now in Kapolei, which is I guess some people call it Croc Center, but we have to get to Kapolei Center, which is probably 4 stops deep out there. So I'm excited about that part of it. That's going to go beyond my lifetime even, certainly my time in office. But I think we've brought a feasibility and a credibility and a calm to the rail project. And all we simply did in the beginning was say, to stop talking about what we couldn't do and figure out what we could do based on monies that are available to us, and then have that evaluated and vetted, which we did extensively as a requirement to bring the FTA back. So I feel really good about that. I would tell you though that I learned over the weekend, I was hoping to be able to begin that transportation from Kapolei to Aloha Stadium by March 30th in the first quarter. I think it's probably safer. I'm not one to hedge, but I think definitely in the first half of the year. But I don't think we're going to be quite ready by the end of March, but we will be ready, and we will be operating. The other thing I just want to talk about is Parks and Recreation. I could not be any more pleased to have Director Thielen in charge of that, and Kehal Poo and the things that they've been able to do. We recognize that that's the lifeblood for so many people. We put a lot of work in that. It's one of the areas where we're actually hiring a lot of people. It has so much to do with our quality of life. And so we put a high priority on equity in that regard, and a lot of attention. Just want you to know that I was really pleased even last summer with our summer fund numbers, but it goes way beyond that in the programs and what we afford. And the last 2 things I'll just talk about is that, Oahu needs a landfill after 2028. And we did everything right to try to solve that situation. We've now asked for a 2-year extension from the Land Use Committee. We're not looking to extend the Waimanalo Gulch lease, but we need some time to negotiate. The Land Action Committee went 0 for 6. I don't have to tell you what the sensitivity, the governor talked about it today over at Aquifer, and you heard his comments, but everything is a no pass zone, except for a couple of areas. One of them is military, the other is state agricultural land. And we want a couple of years to further, because we were due to come up with something, but we want to exhaust our energies into seeing if something can't be negotiated there, because there's been that standing promise to the people on the leeward side that we would not extend Waimanalo Gulch. So in the spirit of the first 2 years of being in office, these challenges, the fact that Red Hill exacerbated everything, I think we might have been able to make an argument about a landfill over an aquifer at some point in time with today's technology. I really do. If you listen to Dr. Roger Babcock and the other conversations that we've had, I think that's a non-starter at this point, and so we're going to look for an alternative. And the last thing is that Red Hill is also a priority for us in conjunction with that, everything that's being done. And so I met with Admiral Aguilino a bunch of times, talked with them again this morning, and with Admiral Paparo. I have a little different view. I think that everything I've heard from those folks is that they understand challenges they've had, problems they've made, the mistakes they've made. And I think they're trying to operate at a high level of integrity. We want to reinforce that with them. We know we need to get those tanks empty sooner rather than later. And I feel like a lot's happening that way. So as I said earlier, I didn't come with a PowerPoint today. We've submitted our priorities. We'll be there in committees, and I'm here to answer any questions you have. And this is just quite honestly, this is just a tip of the things we're working on. And maybe I'll close and just tell you on a very personal level that this for me is a challenge of a lifetime. The responsibility in this job is unlike anything I've ever known before, but I am so encouraged, and the way I started with the quality of the men and women on our team, their commitment. I'm humbled by it each and every day, and the fact that they're really determined to make a difference. So with that, if there's any questions.
Specific bills that you're requesting the speaker and the president to introduce on city and county's behalf.
Michael, do we have any specific bills? We sent over a bunch of them, about 5, 6 pages.
Maybe if you can go over those.
Okay. I appreciate that question. Yeah, this is 2 sheets. This is what we sent over. You want me to, I mean, you got House Bill 100, which is related to criminal justice data sharing. House Bill 101 related to the employees' retirement system. I mean, we sent over, Chair, we sent over 2 sheets. You want me to go through these now?
Well, just the ones that you want to highlight so that we can already begin a dialogue with the counties.
Okay. Well, from my standpoint, going back to what I said about public safety, anything and everything we can possibly do to really help us enforce what we really like to do. Because I think more than anything, everybody's primal need is to feel safe. And in fact, and so I think that the bills that are related to that would be of real importance. And obviously next to that is anything involved with housing.
Okay, do any of the bills have any budget requests? Are there any appropriations to any of the bills?
Guys are saying no. They came in, they said it would be my backup group over here, so I'm checking with them on that to be sure, okay? Yeah, no.
So city and county is not asking for any financial assistance this session? Okay.
I don't know, we're not. No, I want to be, now ordinarily I would say yes to that just off the top without even knowing the answer to it. But when they say no, because I think I've had the same conversation with them, no, we're doing pretty well. I'd say this, if I can just one other perspective on operating the city. For the first 18 months, one of the things that was really amazing to me, you come in mid-year and you have a budget that was done by the prior administration, which understandably had to be cut because COVID and all that was impacting us. But then they modeled the 22 budget off of that 21 budget, which had been cut dramatically. And we had 60 days to balance it. And they left office telling us we had a $400 million revenue shortfall. And we got that done. It was voted on 9-0 by the city council. I'm really proud of that work. But it wasn't until this past July that the money in our budget was reflective of our priorities and our policies. And so now I feel like we're just beginning. And I know that you understand that, but for me, that was its own education, especially given the circumstances, because there were so many cuts and restrictions put in. So the fact that I can answer that question saying we don't need any special appropriations, I feel pretty good about our fiscal management.
Members, questions from the Senate? Questions from the House? Senator Favela.
Sure. Just a couple. A lot of the Honolulu current efforts to work with the new state house, new House Chief of Housing, Nani Maderas, in the governor's office, knowing that the housing, is a major issue tied into homelessness.
I've known Nani for a long time. I've known James Koshiba for a long time. I'm excited to see what we're able to do with the emergency proclamation. In fact, this morning I talked with Twinkle and James afterwards. Nani and I go way back on the homeless issue. As I said a few moments ago, Senator, probably one of the major reasons why I decided to run for this office. It's something I think we can really make a big difference in. So you can count on total collaboration.
With the city, continue the sanitation efforts to address homelessness and encampments along with the corridor of efforts to state working social services provided with sustained substance abuse treatment and or housing. We understand that you are going to be working in getting this thing done, but how much of the efforts are you guys are going to do with substance abuse and with that kind of treatment going forward?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that, working with Governor Green, we need beds to put people in there. 50% of our homeless population on a minimum of 50% has been on the streets. This could be anywhere in the island for 10 years. And a very high percentage of those people are either mentally ill, drug addicted, or alcohol related, or some form of addiction. And so that's not an easy population to work with, as we know. So you absolutely need to have treatment, but we need those beds. And as I said, the thing we just did down on Hawai'i Street is pretty innovative with the John A. Burns School of Medicine. And I think we're going to look to find more. It's one of the requests that I've talked to Governor Green. He said this morning, he said, we've been talking a lot lately. We need places to take people. That's the missing leg right now. We've begun, I think we have a really good job of being able to identify and build trust with people on the streets. We're trying to get more from Honu as a transition place. I'm not satisfied with the number of people they're accepting each month. We've got some really good basics put in place, but we need a place to put people where they can get care. And that's what we're going to work on. I think that's one of the things that you can anticipate hearing about.
Any questions?
Chair,
Representative Ward.
the lower house. Mayor, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I totally believe in home rule, but I have a tax policy question. The counties can now have a TAT tax, a GT tax, property tax, you got a storm drain tax. I'm going to ask probably all the mayors, are we doing the right thing by doing that, or you want even more taxing authority? Because if we get a podge of island, different tax of hotels and business, I'm not sure if we're heading down the right way.
Look, if anything, these days, we've been wrestling with this whole thing and what we're going to do with the recent assessments, right? But the storm utility charge tax is something that's needed to happen a long time ago with our infrastructure. The TAT that we entered into was after we lost the TAT, and we really had no choice on that. Okay, so those things become essential realities. And then as far as the other taxes, they are there. But look, one of the things that we promised everybody is that we would not look to raise property taxes, and we haven't done that. Now, I know the assessments have gone up, but if you saw it in yesterday's paper, and it was an op-ed piece signed by both Councilmember Say and Andy Quano, our Director of Budget and Fiscal Services, explaining that we were surprised by that. Had everything to do with the valuations. This was the first time on Oahu where the retail real estate sales exceeded $10 billion. In fact, on average, it was about $7 billion a year, and this year came in at 12.6. And so the assessments have gone through the roof, driven in part by low inflationary rates, driven in part by post-COVID environment. Point being is that in and of itself creates more tax revenue, even after we come up with something to benefit the taxpayers in some form of exemptions or tax credits or whatever. I'm not looking to add to taxes. Everything and anything we talk about is the increased cost of living around here. But a couple of those things are essential. The stormwater utility needs to happen, okay? We are dealing with ancient infrastructure, and everybody knows it. It's been kicked around down the road. And the other, quite honestly, the way we've divided up the money on the TAT is actually very good for us in a lot of ways. It's a good application, and that's not coming out of local people.
Mayor, could you explain what the stormwater tax is?
Well,
It's so brand new that.
Yeah, it's going to do everything that has to do with fixing all of our pipes that are underground, and many of which are 100 years old or more.
But it really means if you've got a big driveway and a big roof, whatever is not permeable on your property, you're going to be taxed for. That's
correct.
Mayor, the question is, should we, this is probably a suggested rumor more than anything else, but there's some stuff regarding a state property tax. Should we get in the business of taxing the property, or should we leave it to you the way the Constitution says? In other words, this building is filled with rumors. That's one of the things that has been floated vaguely.
I'll tell you, I'm confident in talking to you just about anything, but I'm not a tax guy. But I know this, I don't want to keep increasing the cost of living here for everybody, okay? I don't want to do that. And I'm really, you know what, I'll tell you, we had $400 million shortfall. We had 60 days to balance the budget. And the very first thing I said was no furloughs and no raise in property taxes and no cut in core city services. And to be honest with you, at the time I made that, I didn't really understand what I was saying other than the commitment I had to make sure we wouldn't do that. And we didn't have to do that. Okay, because I was brand new to government when that hit us right in the face. And we literally got sworn in and then they tell you, here's the deal. So in that regard, we're not going to orchestrate anything that's going to make it more difficult for people to stay here. I'm really concerned about the out-migration. That's why I'm saying to you, we don't want to be the people who came in here talking about affordable housing and then did nothing. The first thing we're going to do is figure out what is it the city can really do? And what is it they're not doing? And what can we start doing? And that's really what we've been about. And that had a lot to do with even how we got back into the private activity bonds.
Thank you, Mayor. So the state should get into the property tax business. That's what
I
heard you
can't
say.
speak for the state, sir. I
Thank
think,
you. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Marwati.
Afternoon, Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to circle back to housing. You know, you're addressing the homeless problem, but it comes from upstream housing problem. And I know that you were looking at streamlining your Department of Planning and Permitting, at staffing problems. Can you update us on what you're doing in terms of streamlining? Because the permitting is what is a challenge for getting more housing inventory. And if you're doing rentals and whatever else you're doing to increase our inventory in housing.
Well, you know, if you look just at what the audit told us, it was done in 2020, and then we got to act on it coming into office in 21, was that, you know, that you had a situation in which it was not really well invested in. It wasn't invested in people. It wasn't invested in technology. And quite honestly, you know, it didn't take very long for us to run into a situation where we had criminal activity exposed by the arrest. So everything we've been dealing with DPP has had a lot to do with, you know, some of it's cultural reform. A lot of it's, as I just said, it's only been 6 months. So well, 7 months now, going on 7 months with the money, but we were investing in people. We made a 3-year plan of 160 people that we wanted to hire 80 this year, 40 new and 40 for replacements. We've invested in technology on a couple of different major systems, and made a change in leadership. And that combined with the fact that we're just trying to eliminate processes through self-certification and meeting with industry experts, whether it's been the solar industry, the developers and the builders. Certainly Build One offers, aside from financial assistance to builders, a suite of offerings that we want to see actually affected through DPP, not the least of which is, you know, permits after, as it's been written into law, ensuring that we get permits and certificate of occupancy. So a lot of this is just eliminating some of the incredible bureaucracy that has been set up that actually, for me, coming into it and trying to solve a problem, because I think that's our business mantra, is to understand the problem before you offer solutions, is we have way too many rules. There are too many reasons to say no to something. So a lot of it is that we're sort of thawing it out and unfreezing it and investing in it at the same time, if that makes sense. So we have a real focus on building rental units. Yeah.
And the focus on affordable, not, you know, the high end
No.
housing, but where it's, you know, 100% and lower AMI would be where I think the need really is greatest.
Every
in this county.
every groundbreaking center I've gone to in the last 2 months has all been about 60% AMI.
Oh.
Yeah, or even lower in some cases. And we, if we can get the traction, which I think we're just about to get that on the Bill 7, Bill 1 momentum, you're going to see a lot of affordable rentals being built right here in the urban core, because it alleviates part of our biggest problem is that we already have existing infrastructure. I said earlier, one of the things that the city can do that we've talked about, since we don't have a building department, is with some of the bonds and whatever else, to invest in infrastructure, work in conjunction with the state and what they can do, what they own in land, we can do that. But when you start talking about the urban core and these aged properties, you know, that already have, though, access to infrastructure, that really facilitates a lot. And they're just providing the financial incentive. But I'd actually plan to go to Governor Green and ask him to help double down on that to make it even more so for these private builders. Because what's happened, the concept is really good, but as everybody knows, all the cost of everything has gone up, you know. But we've actually met with the banks and they've agreed to keep the numbers down. And we're doing everything we possibly can to specifically, I can tell you, these meetings are unprecedented. We call all the banks together and say, you got to hold your interest rates at a time right now when interest rates are going to go up north of 6%. So to try to facilitate that. So we're trying anything and everything we possibly can. I think you're going to start to see it manifest itself.
Thank you, Chair.
Questions from the House?
Mayor, you have a list of 12 bills. They seem to be of statewide import. Have these bills been cleared with the other counties?
So I look over to Michael and Krishna. Through HCOM, we coordinate. Yes, sir.
So these are countywide priorities, not just Honolulu.
Well, yeah, I think I was just going to say that, Mike, thanks. But there are some that are county specific, but there are some that are broader than that, yes.
Senator Keith Agaran.
you, Mayor, for being here. I know that you answered a couple of questions about housing already, but I specifically want to sort of ask in the discussions you've been having with the Green administration. I know that last summer you revived your PAB program. So I'm wondering if any discussions have gone as far as deciding whether or not you could transfer or reallocate some of your private activity bond volume allocation back to the state so that the state could move forward on some of the projects. Because I understand that HSFDC has done some projects that were actually city related. And I'm wondering if any of the $135 million cap that you have in 2023 could be transferred to the state.
That's a great question. You know, my initial reaction to that was no, I don't want to do that because it took us it took us 2 years to get ready to be able to do these PAB allocations. And again, wanting the city to very much be a stimulus. But by the same token, I understand what's already been committed and it is for the good of the city. So at this point right now, I think, and that's one of the things I have a meeting with Denise Matsubara this Friday, and with Craig Harai joining us, I want to be fair about that. Okay. We had already given back 120 million since we were in office 21. The allocations we're talking about now that are becoming public come from 2020. We were able to retain that. And of course, 22 and now 23, 120 million a year. So that leaves us now a little bit under 240 million based on how expressions of interest, our new bond council, we've selected where we want to go. We've got to go through some of the stuff with council and whatever. But I would be open-minded for the good of the city about doing that. And I'm going to take advice when we get into those specific projects.
Sure, that's fair enough. And I think that's good for us because we'll be considering a number of proposals, including giving more money to HFDC, but if they can't use it and they can't get it out, then we know we need to invest elsewhere.
Yeah. Part of my thinking, it may sound presumptuous, is, you know, when I looked at an opportunity like what private activity bonds could represent, and the city wasn't doing it and hadn't been doing it for 23 years at the time, you know, the first question you ask is why not? And then you have to go through everything we went through just because we lack the expertise to stand up that program and get us in a place. I'm interested in these things that are going to sort of change the trajectory of how the city's operated for the overall good. And so we're right there. We haven't even officially announced our first allocation where we're talking about having to split up some more, but if it's for good, the one thing I can tell you, sir, is we're not going to be obstructionists. You know, the night that Governor Green got elected, they called me up on the stage, and what I said to the people of the state was, you can anticipate unprecedented collaboration. So I'm not going to be duplicitous about that. So whenever there's an opportunity to do stuff like this, I want to be able to do it. I just want to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons and not just advocating.
Just for the, can you tell us since it just got revived, how much interest did you get and did you actually use all of the allocation?
No, we've only used, we're going to use all of the 2020, which is 120 million, plus about 15 million more right now.
Okay, thank you.
Total of about 135 million.
Manager Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Wanting to know if you would be willing to work with the council as far as looking at properties for use it and lose it? Because there are a lot of properties that got zoning and caused the property values to go up, and then they want to sell it. And so if they don't develop it within a certain time, then it get down zoned and the cost goes down, and people who really want to develop can afford to buy it and develop. This is a measure introduced way back when I was on the council. So I was wondering if that's something that you would be willing to look into.
Yeah, I think we want to look at what the council, look, I think the fundamental, Senator, the fundamental issue is we lack supply. That's also part of what drives the prices up. So anything and everything we can do to create housing inventory, I can promise you, we're going to look at it, but like any business deal, we're not going to make bad deals, but if we can somehow problem solve and forge a good thing, yeah, absolutely. I think that's what I'm looking for from the city. That's what we want to create, is that kind of not only collaboration, that kind of leadership, that kind of initiative, that kind of responsibility to own this to the extent that we can. So I'm not going to say no to anybody or anything on any ideas or possibilities that help us increase supply and alleviate the incredible housing shortage that we have.
Well, that's something we've discussed way back when, but nothing's really been done because there seems to be some pushback. But again, it inflates the prices, and then people who want to develop it can't afford it. They can't make the profit because the values have gone up because we've granted the zoning that they've sat on for years and years and years. They want to flip the properties.
Yeah. You know, I don't know why the pushback. I don't know what's going on. But my attitude since we came into this job, look, I tell you, I can say this in all honesty, with all due respect to my colleagues that are here, the mayors of the other counties. When I strip away all the fanfare that comes with this job of being mayor, this job is about problem solving and finding good solutions. Okay? It really is that. I mean, but they just come at you all day long, night and day, and it never stops. But I'm about the business of just trying to solve problems. And I don't know what's gone on before, what the agendas were, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. At the age of 76, I'm not standing before you to build a political career. I stepped into this job to try to make a difference at a time when I felt maybe I could. We won large. That to me was a personal referendum about don't screw up the job and try to do the best we can. And we walked into office during a very difficult time to problem solve in the middle of the pandemic, where a lot of other things stacked against us. And that's why I opened up today's meeting of telling you I feel really good about where we are 2 years into it, with the team we have, the plans we've made, and understanding what our capabilities are. And one thing I promise everybody is we will collaborate. The one thing I love about our team is there are no silos. This is a group that really works well together and is ready to embrace the best idea.
And that's why I'm bringing it up to you, because I can count on you to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Kila.
Mayor, thank you for coming. I'd just like to, before I ask my question, I'd be remiss and I thank you folks for your expeditious help on waiving the fees to help us dispose of tires. Totaling $10,000, the removal of 150 legally dumped tires. So
Did we
thank you
do all
for
of that?
your
When
commitment.
last I heard, I thought that was still under discussion.
Oh, you signed it. So.
did? Okay. You know, there's these four guys sitting over here.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
all right.
I'd like to extend that thank you for the quick response. But I'd be remiss not to ask, so when we're talking about the landfill and looking at federal sites, have the conversation started with our federal partners?
Not
with-
yet. We're putting together a package. I want to be able to go to them.
Okay.
Look, I think if there's ever a time to negotiate, perhaps with the military, given the circumstances, the time couldn't be any better. But I don't want to be presumptuous because, you know, these have been long-held properties, and I'm not naive either. But I think we have some leverage under the circumstances.
Well, you know where I stand on it, and so please continue to keep us in the loop, and
We
I'd
will.
be grateful to assist with any
We
of those
will. Look,
conversations.
we love the notion of being able to figure this out. I got to tell you, figuring out the landfill, if we can pull this off, I love that. I love that. This is a major problem, okay, that we want to solve. I can just leave it like that.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Chair.
Senator Lee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have two questions. The first is, you know, on the state side, we're obviously dealing with cost of everything as well for local residents. Cost of transportation is one of those things that right behind cost of housing is a significant spend for a lot of families. In particular, we've been trying to draw down a lot of federal money. I'm sure as the counties have as well, to try and put in not only better public transit, but other modes of transportation that are a lot cheaper for folks to get around. The state has acted as a pass-through for some years for things like safe routes to schools and other federal dollars that it distributes to the counties as grants and other things. If we had access to a lot more of that federal money, because now our grant capacity and other things with IIJ and other stuff is rapidly increasing, does the county have the, I think, bandwidth or capacity to really ramp up the number of projects that it's implementing, for example, around schools and other state facilities where safe access and cheaper access is really sort of a priority?
And when you ask me about bandwidth, you're talking about construction? Yeah, I mean, right now, one of our departments we really desperately need to build is our design and construction. That's one of those places lacking in people. But I think that, we're gonna look at every opportunity. I talked to Senator Schatz a lot about federal subsidies, and I know we just had Congresswoman Takuda and Congressman Case in my office just Friday, telling them, look, with all the action going down in DC, I want to be sure we're not standing there missing out on any opportunity. So transportation is a big part of what we're doing. Easy access, if we can get federal help. I mean, look, one of the things I'm really proud of, I didn't even talk about today, is that when we came into office, there's a whole different thing happening with respect to federal monies, the rent utility relief money, the ARPA money, all those things. We came with a lot of ground rules with the Treasury, which we had to figure out. And we actually did, and we did very, very well. You probably know that the city of County of Honolulu is one of the leading cities in the country in distributing rent utility relief money. And if we get the appropriation from council, by the end of this first quarter, we'll have given out over $310 million to the most needy families. We overcame a lot of issues with that. Overcame technology, we overcame language barriers, for a lot of things. So anytime we get our hands on federal money, and we want to do that, if it's involving transportation, easing the cost, we want to do that. That's the best I can tell you. But from a construction standpoint right now, with our CIP projects and whatever, we suffer from some manpower problems, which is what we're trying to build.
Well, thanks for that. And then second question on a slightly different topic. I know the city's been grappling with access to public spaces and parks and trails and all that sort of thing. The state side has as well. And I know some of our fellow colleagues and the departments have doing great work on managed access and things like that. I know in particular when it comes to like haiku stairs and a couple of the other more sensitive spots, the city's spending money on ultimately restricting access. Is there room for a discussion in cases like that to then turn over perhaps some sort of agreement with the state so that the state can do managed access so that we can raise revenue, not only for the state, but also for the counties as well?
Yeah. Well, haiku stairs was a really interesting topic. And I really went into it initially thinking we could save the stairs. It's our version of, Machu Picchu, if you will, and then as we really began to drill down on it, I realized this notion about this public-private partnership in the middle of a neighborhood just didn't make any sense. And then you get into the other issues of liability and whatever. And so a decision had to be made, and we made a decision we were going to take down the stairs. But recently, and I don't think Senator Schatz would mind me talking about it, he's saying to me, perhaps he could find the money to turn it into a federal park. We change the entrance to a different place, redirect the stairs, fix up the rest of it, be able to support it with federal monies, if you will, to reconstruct. And I told him that I was in favor of that. If we could pull a 50-pound rabbit out of the hat on this one, it would be great to do. But right now, our plan is, and we're still going through all the procurement procedures, and he understands that, is to take the stairs down. We're not looking to punish anybody, but that's just a liability and a decision that had to be made. So that's where I am on that, because I don't think it's fair to the people who live there. And it's also a pending liability. And somebody said to me not long ago after we had it, he said, well, nobody ever gets airlifted out of there. And I think within a week or two, somebody was, so, and you've talked to HFD and you talked to HPD and stuff, and there are issues there. So we made a decision that had been kicked around for too long. But I'm willing at the 13th hour to find out. And I understand this has been discussed before, but just maybe with the federal monies, I'd like nothing more if we could do that. If somewhere in there, then we can benefit from that. That's great. I'm not when it comes to business deals, and I think the guys here would tell, I'm not closed-minded till the very end, but I am willing to make a decision. I do think that decisiveness is a really key part of being in a role that I'm in. And so we made a decision on that. In the 13th hour, I'm willing to listen to an option if it proves to be viable. And that's probably the best I can offer you. If that doesn't come true, the stairs are going to come down.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Council members' questions?
Chair, I have one more question.
Oh, let's see who else has questions. Anyone who hasn't? Okay, Senator Milwaukee.
Thank you. Just shifting gears to your what you're doing in terms of climate change, sea level rise. Governor says he's putting $100 million into that. What is the city's plans in terms of either using federal funds or city funds? Because we're having all of the shoreline erosion and problems in terms of shoring up those, especially residential areas that are close to the shoreline.
Well, I think we've come a long way. One of the things that we did inherit from the prior administration was the beginning, if you will, of a climate change, sustainability, and resilience department. In fact, I was on as a general manager of Hawai'i News Now as one of the people on the initial committee. And I'm happen to be somebody who understands as island dwellers what we're facing with sea level rise and other aspects of climate change. So we've been so we made a change. We made a change in leadership. We made a change in direction. We went from a policy making kind of an organization to an adaptation one. And one of the first things we did when we lost the Alawai flood mitigation project, and that was just before we got into office. Mike and I visited with Mayor Caldwell, and the Army came in and said, "Game over. We'll see you." Well, we got that back. We're going through the ascertainment phases now, and the same thing with Vailali Stream out in Laie. And for that matter, anything and everything we can do as island dwellers, be it federal, anything that we're committed to from the city and county in the shoreline management agreement. And again, that's an issue that we're going through with DPP too, and how best to calibrate this, because there's some extreme positions and other things that we're thinking, we can ease into it, and it's different in different places of the island. I can only tell you that if we did nothing else but this issue, it'd be a full-time gig. So we're looking at everything. I've got some really talented people in there, and Matt Gonzer and Nicola Hedge, who's a director and deputy director, and some really good people. And we're trying to, we're doing everything. I mean, from electrification of the fleet to our shoreline management agreements to anything that we can possibly do to be supportive of any state initiatives as well with anybody and everybody, because it's very real. The last thing I did before I left Hawai'i News Now is I went out and personally raised $750,000 to produce 3 documentaries. And nobody in this town pays $250,000 for a documentary. But I hired these world-class producers to come in and document, because the state of the city wasn't doing anything on the subject.
Thank you for that.
Okay, and we produce those documentaries to educate people. Because I think if you educate the populace, then it should hopefully empower all of us to do what we need to do. But this is not, you talk about decision-making, there's not an easy way out of this. A lot of hard decisions in front of us.
Thank you, Mayor. And the collaboration between state, city, and federal communities is important. So we're looking to coordinate that effort as well.
Mayor, if you can just give us a breakdown of how the city spends its 3% of the TAT.
The new TAT?
Yes.
Okay, we divided it up, and this is off the top of my head now. I know we're going to retain 1.5% in perpetuity. And we've got 25%, Mike, I really probably need to know, 25% of it's been earmarked for, it's the key item that keeps popping up in my head, but some of the cultural things we're going to do. And then there's other money that's been put in there. And so what we want to do is create a revenue stream of perpetuity if we needed it. Especially on anything we would be considering on phase 2 of the rail or anything else that we're possibly going to need. I just don't have the actual breakdown right now off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay, how much of the 3% goes to destination management?
0.25, I believe. Did we do that? I think so. I think that's what we did.
0.25. Do you know what the dollar amount is?
Well, I think that this year, I can't do it in my head, but if we're going to do about $90 million, 0.25 of $90 million, that I calculate, I could give you that answer in 2 seconds.
So 0.25% of the 90.
I think that's estimated. It's just, we're expecting the money to come in about double of what we were getting before from the state.
Okay. Which destination management projects or programs is the city working with HTA on?
You know, I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look at that. You guys know off the top of your head? If these two guys don't know, nobody knows right now off the top of my head.
Are you,
No,
is there anything with HTA? Any agreement?
I can tell you one thing, we work closely with Esther Kiana, and she's been a driving force on this. And we seem to be in agreement on a lot of things. So Mike is telling me it's to control access to city parks is what we're doing on the hotspots. Is it?
So Amy Asselby
You can
in
just
OER,
State your name.
sorry, Mike Formby, Managing Director. Amy Asselby in OER led the discussions with HTA. And they basically came down to 2 points, and that was to work on hotspots, transit and transportation to city parks, and to help with control management. So we're working on that right now. We're having discussions with HTA on what that would look like. And we'll have discussions with council, specifically Councilmember Esther Kiana, who negotiated to get the percentage into the OTAT for destination management.
Okay, so are those initiatives driven by the city or are those HTA initiatives?
That was a negotiation between Hawaii Tourism Authority and the city by OER.
So do you know if they're in the current HTA destination management plans?
Yes, they are.
Representative Wood?
Thank you, Chair. Mayor, I like what you said about, look, we got a problem, we got to have a solution. You're a fixer. Many of this, probably from all of our districts, have a problem with crime. And we are told that there's 200 plus, maybe 300 officers that are out. Is there anything in your game plan to get more officers out on the streets and the beats and keep pulling the fear back from what otherwise, you know, most people feel very safe in our neighborhoods, but it's getting worse and worse. Any fix that you've got that you could tell us about?
Well, I don't know the updated count. The last count I had, we were actually short 344
Okay,
police officers.
it's even worse than that.
Okay.
Okay.
So we've actually we've reduced the class size and expanded the number of classes. We approved a very generous raise, 3.5, which compounded came out to almost 22%, which was unprecedented. Chief Logan is the real deal. And so we've got strong leadership there. We're trying to recruit. We're also being recruited against, if you will. But you're going to see a much more aggressive recruiting act. And we just need, you know, to have more offices. Now, one of the other things we're considering doing, I think we're going to approve it, is a shift in work hours. And there seems to be an attitude if we go to 3/12s, alternating weeks, and then 4/12s next week, that they could actually cover more in neighborhood patrols and whatever. Now, the other thing that we really are going to have to do in the interim, you'll probably hear from us at the neighborhood boards and stuff, is we're going to have our community watch programs really get strong. I was just out in Nanakuli, you know, and I was really inspired by the community program. We're going to just have to start doing more of that. You know, I said earlier today, and I have to be careful sometimes in these public settings. I'm sort of old school. You know, you hurt somebody, you pay for it. And I don't like the fact we got these lurkers running around. That's why I said we got a lot of cooperation from the judiciary. And we've tried to, you know, and we got them to actually waive. They used to just catch and release. We made them stay overnight now, so they have to face a prosecutor in front of a judge. We're trying to put bad people away. But we've got several hundred people running around with long records that should not be out in the streets, just so you know.
You know, what one follow-up to that? What percentage of your lack of officers is due to the West Coast pinching away with?
I think that's contributed to it.
Is it big? Is it growing? Is it stable? Is it getting lesser?
I think it's stable somewhat. I think, you know, Chief Logan's done a good job of convincing some people who would have normally retired. We got a huge retirement every year from HP to stay on longer. There are some things that we're looking at to help incentivize that. I think, you know, we were and have been victim to West Coast cities coming in and offering signing bonuses and other things, you know, temporary housing and things like that that made it very competitive. I think, I don't want to put too much on the chief, but a lot of it starts with leadership and the tone that he's setting and the culture that they're building within the police department. So this is an uphill battle. We give it top priority. I'm trying to say, like I said, we're amenable on the money, we're amenable on the work hours, we're amenable on anything and everything we can possibly do to help them with recruiting. We just need to build back our police department. 304. I don't think we necessarily have to fill all 344, but if we could fill, let's say, 250 of those positions, that would be good.
Thank you for prioritizing that.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Senator Shimbukuro.
Get you, Rick. You like this? You guys are next. Yeah, you guys are next. Yeah.
Mayor Caldwell had passed a public lodging ban that was supposed to span the whole island of Oahu. And my understanding is that due to the lack of transitional and shelter space, it hasn't been able to be implemented. And I'm just hoping that I was happy to hear what Governor Green said today, working with you to really prioritize the homelessness crisis that we're experiencing now. So I'm just wondering if we can get any closer to making that public lodging ban island-wide and then offer, being able to offer then beds to those in the homeless crisis.
Yeah, I would be in favor of that. I don't have the update on that, but as I said earlier, we need beds, we need places. And that's why we said that dealing with the systemic issues of homelessness is the best way to approach it. As I said earlier, probably the three best cities have been Boston, New York, and Denver. I mean, Houston and Denver. And a lot of what we're doing is sort of modeled after that. I know they've had a head start on it. So anything we could do, but we need an alternative place to put them. That's why the sweep strategy didn't work. You have to deal with it systemically. You have to provide services. I think the good news for us, as challenging as it is really is a cost benefit. The savings alone are dramatic to what our hospitals are spending. We did an award-winning nationally seen documentary on No Room in Paradise when I was in my last life. And the CFO from Queens said it's $500 million a year. But when we had our emergency rooms being over, even the cost differential on what we can do if we can just provide services will be tremendous. They literally pays for itself. We just have to locate those places. And I've got some strong feelings about that. I think we're just beginning.
Because I think in Colorado, they have sanctioned campsites.
Yeah.
And so is that what you're looking at?
Well, that's some of it. We're looking for more of as I said, you've got a population, nearly half of them have been on the streets for 10 years or longer, and a much higher percentage than that are suffering from some kind of addiction or mental illness. The out of sight, out of whatever, unless you're providing services, that doesn't necessarily work. Okay. I heard Governor Green today talk about 12 Kahales. I'm really a big fan of James Koshiba. He and I have done a lot of work in the past. In Twinkle, we even spoke today on what they're doing in Waianae. We know that what Dwayne Carrizo did, although I think that's an anomaly, Kauiki, because it took an exceptional amount of resources. But I want to see what this other thing, if we can build those kinds of communities. Auntie Blanche was talked about in Waimanalo. But there are other things we need to do that are more medicinal in nature that we can pick up with core, build that trust, put these people in clinical settings as opposed to that housing. So it's a duality. Some of it's housing or taking houseless people and who are not really homeless, they're part of a community, and give them a roof over their head. The other part is dealing with the people who are just really need help. Okay. So
Mahalo.
you're welcome. It's a complicated problem. It's not easily solved,
Yeah.
but we're going to make a big difference in this. I can promise you that. We're going to make a very big difference.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm well looking forward to that. Thank you.
Blangiardi, thank you for being before us. And I appreciate your comments earlier on how you plan to help housing move forward and work through some of the areas that may be problematic. The emergency proclamation that the governor, and I appreciate you supporting it, but basically it's trying to get around red tape. So it's basically trying to get around our regulations, meaning state and county regulations, right? So my assumption is it's similar to what Governor Ige had, and but then at the end of the day, proclamation did help expedite projects during that time, and I would assume it would help in this situation also. But the problem still lies in the red tape. So as you, and I haven't got a chance to look at the proclamation, but will you be looking at it and seeing what it's trying to get around or fast track and coming up with recommendations, not only for the county, but talking with us on what can be done?
I welcome that opportunity. Like I said, I've not seen it myself.
Yeah.
You know, I hear what you say, getting around the regulations. I think more in terms of what can we do to fast track and make it, you know, it's sort of like facilitators versus the regulators, you know?
Well,
And so-
the proclamation was an exemption on certain things, so it's
Right.
getting around, right? So
Right.
it's, and then you're saying you're in full support of that. So looking at the details, are we gonna start seeing things to maybe help get rid of unnecessary red tape?
I absolutely hope so.
Okay,
That would be
okay.
my fondest wish. And I understand that that's what happens here.
So do you plan to give the legislature anything that we can look at during this session?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's almost finalized. Is that right, Krishna? Yeah, pretty close. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, why don't we hear from the next county of.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
The county of Hawaii.
Even though I would love to hear Mayor Roth speak and then Mayor Bisson, we have a really important 3 o'clock meeting that with Hart, it's really sensitive time that I need to take today. Is that okay if we're excused?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making my rookie experience memorable. Let's see.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Chairs De La Cruz and Yamashita, Vice Chairs Kitagawa and Senator Dagaron, members of the House Finance and the Senate Ways and Means. Good afternoon. Thank you for this opportunity to come and talk to you. My name is Mitch Roth. I am the mayor of the County of Hawaii. I think a lot of the things that you heard from Mayor Belangiardi is kind of similar to where we're looking at for the County of Hawaii. I did provide a PowerPoint. I don't think it was able to be put up, but I think everybody got a copy of the PowerPoint. I'm just going to go through some of the slides that we have, and I think you have those in front of you. Starting with the mission of the County of Hawaii. Our mission is to foster a sustainable community where everyone thrives and succeeds. And if you think about that word sustainable, it's read in so many different ways. To me, what that word sustainable means is the ability to allow our keiki to raise their keiki in this state, and preferably, you know, people from Hawaii Island allowing their kids to raise their kids and their kids to raise their kids on our islands. If that's going to happen, we have to have some really big changes. I have 3 children. All 3 of them are now living on the mainland. So some of those changes that we have to think about is, you know, what will keep our kids here? Affordable housing. You heard that was the #1 priority of the city and county of Honolulu. It is likewise #1 priority of the county of Hawaii. Affordable jobs, you know, quality jobs where, you know, people can earn a living. That's, you know, we have to be looking at diversification and thinking about where those jobs are going to be in the future. To me, I think those jobs in the future are going to be in the STEM industries: science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. Those were a lot of the high-paying jobs are going to be. You have to think about, for sustainability, some of the anchors, an environment that people want to stay in, that they want to be in. And so we're focusing on a lot of those things, and we're not doing it alone. Moving to the next slide, we are already working in great partnerships with the state, whether it's the legislature or our state offices. And I think if we're going to get on this vision of a sustainable Hawaii Island, a sustainable state of Hawaii, we all need to be working together. And I just want to thank our state partners for some of the things that we're working on. The broadband capital improvement and digital equity. We're all working on making sure that everybody has access to the internet, whether you're a child going through school or whether you're going to be working from home. You know, I just came back from the mayor's conference in Washington, D.C., and we heard that from the president on down through the different groups. 34 states have jumped on board, Hawaii being one of the first ones, and we really appreciate the partnerships that they're working on. There's a focus on remote sites and rural populations. Hawaii County is an island with a lot of remote sites and rural populations. Early childhood education and capital improvements with childcare facilities and mixed delivery programs. We really take our hats off to the legislature, in particular, the lieutenant governor, for the push that is being made in these efforts. You heard the governor today talk about the possibilities of a hydrogen hub, where our state is looking at bringing in possibly over $1 billion. We like to think that a lot of that work is actually started on Hawaii Island. You know, recently Hawaii Island was one of 2 locations in the United States that got a hydrogen mentor-mentee relationship. The other place, which is part of our program, which is part of our grant submission, was Lancaster, California. Together with Lancaster, California, Hawaii Island is partnering up with Namie, Japan in Fukushima to work on this hydrogen mentor-mentee relationship. And we're very proud of that because it really positions us well for the future and for this grant in particular, which could change the way we think about our energy resources and our environment here in Hawaii, the state and on our island. Before I get going too much further, I had my Director of Research and Development, he had to go, but I also have my Director of Finance, Deanna Sacco, who's here. And one of the things that Deanna tells me is that our economic environment, by the numbers, our island has recovered to the 2019 levels. However, we still have a lot of challenges that are ahead of us. Food insecurity and jobs continue to be a concern of island residents. And you heard Mayor Blangiari talking about the shortages in Honolulu. We suffer very similar shortages for Hawaii County. We have about 360 empty positions. But not only that, all of our hotels on the Kohala Coast tomorrow could take in, each one of them, between 100 and 150 employees. So it is a problem that is not unique to the counties. It's happening in our restaurants. We know that a lot of restaurants, even here on Oahu and on other islands, they've been closing early because they don't have the staffing to work on those. We think a big part of that is housing. And you know, people can't afford to live here. They're going other places. They're not going to be able to work here. As you know, Hawaii County has also suffered natural disasters, with the 2022 Mauna Loa eruption being the most recent. A key lesson that we've learned has been resilience of our island's communities. And another one was partnerships. One of the things that we did during this last eruption is that we worked together with the state. Just want to give hats off to Ed Sniffen from the Department of Transportation and Governor Green, because we opened up a emergency access road off of the Daniel K. Inouye Highway that allowed 30,000 vehicles, I think a little bit more than 30,000 vehicles, to go through, view the lava, and do it in a way where people weren't stopping on the highway with their kids. One of the things that I saw going up there, with cars driving 50, 60 miles an hour. We had to deal with a lot of other emergencies. One of the interesting things last week while I was at this mayor's conference, talking to mayors who had areas that are about 4 or 5 miles, square miles. I had to in one day issue a press release on a drought and a flood on 2 different sides of our islands. It was quite a thing, but our island is quite large. It's about the size of Connecticut. Some of our operational priorities moving forward: streamline the building code and related processes. We have not submitted very many bills this year. I think we have 2 that are going through signatures, but the one bill that I would like to talk about, which is not a funding bill, is to allow our counties to go below the state building code recommendations. Currently, if you adopt a building code, you have to stay at that level. We have 2 years to adopt or not adopt. We can make changes, but oftentimes we learn about things that we weren't thinking about. Let me give you an example. In our energy code, I think one of the things you have to do is you have to put fiberglass insulation in your roofs. Makes a lot of sense if you live in Colorado, not so much sense if you live in Kona. If you have problems with your landfill, what do you do with fiberglass? That doesn't impact your environment. Let me give you another one. There's a lot of things in our building code that require you to get a sign off from a licensed engineer. So we just went through something with HBM where they had to get a sign off from an engineer, a licensed engineer, and it took them 8 months to get a sign off from a licensed engineer because we have a lack of licensed engineers. If we are putting these restrictions, this red tape, as Chair Yamashita was asking about earlier, on private citizens who are just trying to get by, you're talking about time, which is money, and you're talking about the cost of some of these professionals, which is money. Many people in Hawaii have lived in a single wall construction houses for 40, 50 years without problems. I'm not saying that we go back that far, but we allow our councils to say, you know what, this doesn't work. Let's make changes to go for below the state code on single family houses so we can get more single family houses there. I'm going to talk about something else in affordable housing. One of the things when we came in, we looked at what kind of affordable housing was in our pipeline to get ready, and the pipeline takes a long time to get through. We came in, there was a little over 1,000 affordable housing units in our pipeline. We were over 5,000 units in our pipeline, and part of that is working with our developers to make sure those things can happen for affordable housing. And I think as the state looks at some of the laws moving forward, how we get some of those red tapes taken away. We need to improve our wastewater system. Many islands, places have one wastewater system. We have 9 facilities. With Hilo wastewater system being the most critically in need of attention. 86% of our Hilo wastewater system needs replacement. And so we've put out a bond. We're going for federal grants, but we're also asking the legislature to help us with about a $50 million CIP project that is also going through. We need to make sure that we are looking at agriculture, not only in our island, but for the whole state. If you think about sustainability and think that Hawaii used to produce all of its food, and now we produce 10% of the food for the state of Hawaii, we need to look at ways that we take away the red tape from the farmers and people that are trying to produce food. Some of that is can be done on the state side, where people who are leasing properties from the state for their agricultural lands to allow them to extend their leases, but give them more time to do it rather than coming to the last minute. We need to partner on sea level rise and climate change adaptation. Our environment is what is connected to hospitality, tourism, but it is our lifeblood. And if we want our children to stay here, we want them, they're going to have an environment that keeps them here. We need to support our hospital capital improvement programs. I know the governor talked today about the Hilo Hospital, $50 million, and we need every bit of that. But we also have a state hospital in Kona that is in desperate need of capital improvements. And if they don't get the capital improvements, that puts a lot of people's health in jeopardy. Let me just say this. 2 years ago, almost today, I had a massive heart attack and I was in Kona. And Kona Hospital was not the place that they took me. They took me eventually to Hilo Hospital because Kona Hospital did not have the ability to treat me for the heart attack. Because of the time it took for me to get to the hospital in Hilo, my heart took a lot of damage. And that could have been prevented. But all of you, at some time or another, will probably end up in Kona. And you never know, or your family members could end up in Kona. So I ask, as you think about hospital improvements, you also think about, making sure that Kona Hospital gets their funds, because it could be someone in your family's life that it impacts. On the next slide, I have a little bit about our general fund. We've taken about $597 million, most of that is from property taxes. I would like to just also focus on the amount that we took in from grants, which is about $95 million. We've been going after as many and as much federal grant funds as we can. The expenditures, about 60% of those funds go to personnel. And then debt service, about 8.3. I point this out because out of that 597 million, only 157 million goes to operating and equipment. And operating equipment goes for things like paying gas, paying the electricity, buying trucks because we truck our rubbish from one side of the island to the other, our mass transit. There's a whole bunch of things that those go into. Hawaii County has infrastructure needs of repair of over $1 billion. Matter of fact, about $1.4 billion. That's a lot of money for infrastructure needs with less than $10 million that are generally out there for repairing. We've looked at doing great things in building parks and building a lot of equipment, and shamefully, we have not done a great job over the last 30 years of taking care of that property, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of our infrastructure. I just want to highlight again the big things we're asking for: affordable housing, that's one of our priorities; environmental management, community and health safety, including the police; sustainability, environment, and agriculture. That's where our priorities are this year. We generally, the mayors work together on our priorities, and we started doing that. There was a change at our Hawaii County of Mayors Association, and so we weren't able to get everything. A lot of the programs that Honolulu is talking about are things that we are also looking at. In closing, I just want to again appreciate the support of the state legislature, especially what they provided during the pandemic and more recent natural disasters. Assistance for our island's nonprofit sector and small businesses continue to support our island residents. Again, we're dealing with some increased costs for electricity, transportation, food, housing, and childcare. With all that, the opportunity is to place our island at the forefront of sustainability and equitable practices will help ensure the revitalization and resilience of our economy and our community. Thank you so much again for this opportunity to come and talk. I'm willing to take questions. And
very much. Members will take turns with questions. We'll start with the House. Any questions, members? Senate? Senator Agoro.
For the wastewater plant, this is for the east side, right?
this is for the east side, but it is the one thing.
Let me ask my question.
Go ahead.
How much of a bond did you float, and what is the 50 million going to cover?
So we're thinking it's going to be somewhere around 200 million. I think the bond was 150 million that we're looking at.
What are your options if you don't get a $50 million grant from the state?
We're also looking at the federal government for grants funding as well. And I just want to throw out that this wastewater facility, and I think you had a chance to take a tour of that wastewater facility. You see that there's concrete
No,
that
I
is.
didn't. So maybe some of my colleagues did.
Yeah, we have concrete that's failing. And if we have a major earthquake, we could be putting millions of gallons of raw sewage out into the ocean. And that really impacts the whole state.
Thank you. House members, question? Senator Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Mayor, hydrogen hub, it gets a grant, but what is it going to do? Is it going to have a atom splitter, or give me a sense of how I can relate this to my constituent? I'm not sure I understand the whole process, even though it sounds like it's going to be a breakthrough for energy.
Sure. So we have hydrogen buses that we're starting to look at right now. We've got our first couple. There's hydrogen vehicles. There's a whole bunch of opportunities to create hydrogen. A lot of people think that you just use geothermal to create hydrogen. We have on our island a guy named Hank Rogers, who was, I think, kind of the inventor of Tetris, where he got the rights to Tetris. He has solar panels on at his ranch. It fuels the electricity for the ranch and everything that happens. He takes that extra energy that is created at the ranch, and he's right now creating solar energy with, hydrogen energy, which he fills up his Mirai hydrogen vehicle. And I believe they also have like some forklifts and some other equipment. We right now are sending millions and millions and millions of dollars from our state off island, out of the state, to buy gasoline and diesel fuel. Imagine if we were producing our own energy here. So we have the abilities of creating hydrogen for many things. One of the things we're looking at our wastewater facility is taking that wastewater facility and not only getting rid of the poop, but making methane out of that methane, turning that into hydrogen. We're also looking at our solid waste landfill that's been covered up, which has methane coming out, capping that, creating methane, and again, creating hydrogen. Taking excess wind power and solar power and creating hydrogen that can fuel our buses, our trucks, and eventually our vehicles. We also have the possibility of geothermal, creating enough hydrogen not only to take care of Hawaii Island, but the state of Hawaii, and then exporting hydrogen as fuel energy to run cars, trucks, buses, ships, and hopefully in the future, they're talking about possibly even airplanes.
How is that done? I've got solar on my roof. Can I get hydrogen? What is Hank Rogers doing? What kind
So
of
he has solar on his roof.
Okay.
And he fuels his Tesla. He fuels the electricity for the house, and then I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, but he splits the energy, creates hydrogen, which is a totally clean energy, comes out in water vapors, and he creates hydrogen to fuel his vehicles.
And he splits it just with what?
With water and electricity. I wish I could tell you the whole thing.
I want one of those, is
yes.
my point. If it's that simple.
I'd be happy to take you to his ranch. They actually have a model. He has a model of how they do it. It's pretty cool. They do it right there in front of you. He can also has the cleanest cooking fuel that you can use as well.
Because if that works and it's on a large scale, this is a game changer from the whole fossil fuel argument.
Absolutely. And that's, I was telling Senator Wakai earlier today that, Wayne Gretzky had this quote: "A great hockey player doesn't skate to where the puck is, he skates to where it's going to be." In another 20 years, the reason why the United States Department of Energy is putting out billions of dollars is because they believe this is where we're going to be in the future. And for an island state to use energy that we're producing here, it changes everything. It gives us affordable gives us quality jobs. And it takes away a lot of the costs that we have for everything, for transportation, and everything else that's related.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senators. Any questions?
Richard.
Senator, please.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Mayor, if I may help out a little bit on hydrogen production.
Thank you.
It's the use of the excess electricity that splits water to hydrogen and oxygen. Then you capture both. Your oxygen is actually hospital grade, and then the hydrogen can be stored. And there's numerous ways to be stored. That hydrogen can be used in either a fuel cell, which generates electricity, as the Mayor was talking about, or we can use the gas itself and either spin a turbine with the hydrogen itself. But it's a way of storing the energy, the excess electricity we generate with one of the numerous renewable sources that we have.
Home kit, you could do it at your home with a small kit?
It's not a small kit.
It's not a small kit, not a small kit.
It's a little bit bigger than that,
Right.
but it's not utility size. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Members, any house questions? Okay, back to the Senate. Any? Yes, we're done. Okay, thank you very. Oh, you have one, Representative Favela, Senator Favela.
Just one question, coming through, for all the counties, I never got a chance to ask, Mayor Blangiardi, this question. But do you agree that the counties across the state of Hawaii should consider licensing procedures, regulating procedures for persons who carry concealed or unconcealed firearms and ammunition?
So whether we should,
Yeah, should you guys be considering it? Well, let me get to my next question then.
okay,
Should it be left over to the state to provide statewide policy and regulation on the rights to carry firearm consistent with the federal regulations?
so I do think that in that way, yes, I think the state needs to look into what we have and, take especially the recent Supreme Court ruling and give us some parameters on where that is.
Just a follow-up, since the other mayor not here. The reason why I bring this up is because we was in a briefing hearing with the AG, and they're really planning to ask for money for litigation and challenging some of these concealed carry permits. And I just kind of was blown away, but I know the EG is new and she have other issues of people working from home, and try to get that settled first before she can take on a task and going against the federal law.
I don't know if it's the federal law. I think, we just did some things at our council to make sure that people aren't taking firearms into certain places. And I'm kind of split. I believe in the Constitution and the Second Amendment, but I also know that our law enforcement officers and others, I think about their safety. I think about the safety in our schools. I think about, having last week attended a mass shooting session at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and seeing all the different mayors that have had to deal with mass shootings. And I think it's not an issue of if that happens here in Hawaii, but when that happens. And I think that we all have some kind of responsibilities of putting some reins on what we're going to accept in this, in this state.
To follow up, so some of these areas that the mayors, maybe not you, is already restricted. Schools already, you cannot have firearms. There are already certain regulations that is already regulated. So to have, we have the most highest and strongest laws probably in the nation when it comes to firearms. A couple of years back, I went to go get my permit. It's the most hardest thing to do, even if you want to go through all the procedures. So a law-abiding citizen that goes through all the procedures and the permitting, why would they go out and start shooting people up? This is people that's getting the guns illegally or taking it from other people. But what I'm saying is it's not easy to get your firearm license, especially in Honolulu, just to own a gun. So I'm just saying that, certain regulations is being really regulated in the state of Hawaii. Any more regulations, you're making law-abiding citizens become criminals. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Representative Kahaloa, followed by Vice Chair Argon.
Mahalo, Chair. Mahalo, Mayor Roth, for being here today and for sharing your county priorities. Sorry, I'm a little congested today. Thank you for sharing kind of where you're generating revenue for the county and that you're getting nearly $94.5 million in different grants. Can you share a little bit about what percentage is coming from like post-pandemic ARPA-related funds versus other federal opportunities and what the county's plans are to be able to maximize the opportunity, like you said, in going after other federal opportunities?
So hang on one second. I brought my brains here. Thirds is ARPA post-pandemic, according to the NSACO.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Argon.
Yeah, going back to how the state should be responding to the Supreme Court decision on concealed carry. Every county has been working on their own way of dealing with what kind of permits to issue and what are sensitive places. We had a request from our police chief to perhaps it might be useful to have some statewide minimum standards and identify the sensitive places. Is that, as a former prosecutor, you think that's useful to do?
I personally think it is. It'd be more useful from this perspective, if everybody was under the same rules. So even if the state preempted the counties, so we have one set of rules versus 4 sets of rules, that gets confusing.
Since you have an elected prosecutor, can you speak for the prosecutor, or is that's your view?
I'm probably not my jurisdiction to speak for him.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. House members. Senator DeCoit.
For being here. So just as a follow-up on that, I would think it would be easier if, when the mayors meet, to have a set standard of rules, because as many of our friends and families that travel back and forth, I would think that, one individual coming from the county of Big Island, coming to the county of Maui, it would make it easier to follow those standards. It's really confusing as they move across to whether it be hunting, to understand that you can only do certain things on the Big Island as what you can do in the county of Maui. So I would hope that you folks come up with something that you guys can agree on so that an individual wouldn't get caught with doing something wrong as in hunting without certain regulations put forward.
I'll take that, back to our group of mayors. There's a lot of things that I think we should have home rule on. But when it comes to something like this, personally, I just believe that it would be better if we had one standard. So I'll bring that back. Thank you.
Thank you. And then just on another question, what were the factors in enabling Hawaii County to recover from the pandemic and the ongoing eruptions and return to 2019 levels?
I look back and I think first I'll say is the partnerships that we had. The partnerships that we had across all different areas. Look at hospitality. We had a program where we allowed functions to happen, but we made sure that they had restrictions or protocols that they did. We allowed the places where they're going to have the gatherings to put those protocols together. We reviewed those protocols, and we listened to our community. I think so. I think that was one of the things that helped us quite a bit. We listened to our business community, our chambers of commerce. They gave us a lot of really good feedback, and we listened to our community. I think that was some of the keys that we had for coming back so quickly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Illinois.
Just, sorry, let's see if I can get closer. Can you hear me
I can hear
better?
you. Hi, Senator.
Thank you. Just to follow up, didn't our police chief, I understand, when he got his group together, worked on the sealed and carry firearms. So did you approve or agree with what the police department did?
So, it's interesting. We saw what the police were putting together. We kind of agreed with the ideas that they were putting together for that. It went through council, and, as council is kind of like going to the legislature, what goes in sometimes kind of gets changed. People make concessions and things like that. I still think, and I congratulate our council for taking it on. It was not an easy thing for them to do, as will be the case for the legislature if you take this on. It won't be an easy thing to do. But I really applaud our council for doing it, because it took a lot of courage. It's an important thing. And so
Well,
I
guess
ended up
there's
not
a-
selling it.
Yeah,
I
there's a
not
difference,
signing
I
it.
think, Mayor, because the council are looking at listening to their constituents.
Mhm.
Whereas the safety of the people usually is borne by those that are responsible for addressing the safety of the residents as well. So I guess maybe the police chief had created something. To me, I thought that was a good policy. So I was just wondering if you heard of the police chiefs doing it in a caucus jointly, or?
I know that everybody was talking, that the chiefs were talking, the attorney generals were talking, our corporation council was talking. And I personally think that it would be better if we had one state rule versus every county having a rule.
And I guess I tend to agree with you with that, because, when you have a body and what was experienced in Hawaii County in the discussions, police chief does his policy and the right to protect the people, and then you have the legislation out of the council. So perhaps, I guess we should look at it on a state level. So it'll address, and I guess the communications will be forthcoming, statewide, for our constituents, and at least understand the issues, but take it on the road as well. But I guess I tend to agree with you.
Yeah, I think it was a good start, and I think their hearts are in the right place there.
Yeah, we can't wait any longer, because we have one of the best policies throughout our country, right?
We do. And I got to tell you, seeing a group of mayors, because they had a whole bunch of different mayors from different places. And, some of them had a hard time even telling their stories. And I thought, well, we actually have had this happen here. The Xerox shooting is, that happened here. I just would hate to have it happen, anytime again. And I hate to be the mayor that has to deal with that when it happens.
Thank you. Thank you, Cheers.
Thank you very much, members. Any further questions? Mayor Roth, thank you very much for coming before us.
Thank
we
you.
Look forward to working with you. Next up is the County of Kauai.
Honorable chairs and members, all for the opportunity to testify at this joint hearing. I am Mike DeHelig, Managing Director for the county. Mayor Kawakami sends his regrets that he's unable to be here today. First, we'd like to just mahalo again the legislature for its generosity over the past few years. Most recently, CIP support items from this past year's budget for our county-owned stadiums that our high schools call home during the season. Going into this upcoming fiscal year, we continue to look at improving efficiency in our budget, and due to our commitment to sound fiscal management, our fund balance has put us in a position for Moody's to recently reaffirm our bond rating of AA2. With real property taxes, the bulk of our revenue, indicators are we are in a good position to be able to maintain a strong fiscal picture for this upcoming county budget. Our assessed values have seen unbroken growth since 2013, and we are preliminarily forecasting approximately a 17% increase in fiscal 24 valuations. We are examining ways to create more equity within our real property tax system while trying to disincentivize uses that we strive to limit. Our council has recently passed a bill to tier our real property tax rates for vacation rental and residential investor tax classes, allowing for higher tax capture on uses more inclined to run contrary to our collective affordable housing objectives starting in fiscal year 25. We continue to utilize our GT surcharge to support our transportation initiatives and road and bridge infrastructure projects. These funds have helped us stimulate growth and have assisted with improvement initiatives while avoiding issuing debt that would have been absorbed by our taxpayers. Since its inception, we have now had an appropriate level of resources for a right-sized road maintenance program, reducing the repair of backlogged roads that are in poor to critical condition. We are currently averaging approximately 30 lane miles resurfaced every year, and it will take roughly 20 years to complete every county managed road just once, and that's approximately 620 lane miles. At our current pace of repaving, we are on track to hit 50% of all county roads with our repaving program through the year 2028. That said, while we have no specific proposal this session, we are requesting that the legislature start considering the sunset of the GET and what happens afterwards. And while 50% by 2028 is great, we would like to hit all of our roads on a continuing basis. Additionally, we would like to thank the legislature for the support of the county's TAT authorization. TAT is crucial to our ability to support the infrastructure, not only for our residents, but for our visitors who make up 30% of our daily population. While the legislature we have been grateful that there has been this authorization this session, we have no large-scale asks at this time. However, as we move forward, please allow me to share some of our important issues and top fiscal policy matters where the state of Hawaii and the county of Kauai share a nexus. The first one is relating to Waimea town flooding mitigation. And the slow-moving Waimea River has accumulated sediment buildup, closing the river mouth frequently and resulting in flooding of bordering neighborhoods. Homes and properties in this area are at constant risk of flooding, and which has been linked to this particular closure. This has caused undue stress to the daily lives of nearby residents affected by the risk of flooding. Our county is requesting that the State Department of Land and Natural Resources reassume its regular maintenance of the estuary and river mouth, a longstanding practice that was abruptly stopped by the previous chair. And I know that housing is in everybody's mind this session. And in 2023 and this year, our county is on track to break ground on 400 new affordable housing units between 10 different projects across the county. This is a one-year record for our county, which speaks to our successful model of active county lead development and a history of public-private partnerships. While these projects are primarily multifamily residential projects for families earning 60% and below, we are also building on our island's second supportive housing project for homeless families, an array of single-family limited appreciation leasehold homes that will be available to families earning up to 120 of AMI that will be affordable in perpetuity. Our development model has been to identify and acquire land appropriate for housing development and to complete all required pre-development and entitlement work to meet the sites shovel-ready. We then provide this land at minimal costs to our private developer partners under long-term lease agreements. This model is also dependent on the generous state housing funding available through legislative authorizations to the HHFDC through competitive grant, for which that we are grateful. To assist us in future housing development success, we would like to ask the state to provide greater financial assistance to install and upgrade infrastructure. Under the state's current affordable housing funding model, virtually all financing flows through HHFDC. The loans HHFDC are inefficient to address the infrastructure part of the cost, as affordable housing projects by their nature do not generate income sufficient to cover the resulting debt payments. To assist us in continuing to address homelessness via our successful supportive housing model started with legislative Ohana Zone funds, we ask the state to provide long-term operational support for these projects across the state. When placing a homeless family into a housing first model, there is a resulting savings in reduced emergency room visits, decreased healthcare costs, and a reduction in arrests and judicial interventions. These are we wish that this will help provide a foundation for long-term success. We thank you again for the opportunity to present these brief comments. We look forward to working with you collaboratively during this session. I'm available for any questions.
Members, any questions? Representative Moicall.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you.
Since I've been highlighted on your summary here, I have a couple questions. But
Sure.
first of all, how much of the GT is raised for Kauai yearly? Do you have an estimate?
How much GT is currently raised right now? We are projecting of approximately $32.5 million.
32?
0.5.
Okay, and the TAT?
TAT, we are looking at 16.0 million. That's a 9-month figure from this past
16 million.
fiscal year. Yeah.
So would you say that you're doing better than our share of 15 million that we used to give you?
We're doing relatively better.
That's good to hear.
Yes.
Okay. I know that the levy had about $18 million or so from flood money, the Waimea levy in particular. Has that money been designated for any projects?
Yes, the money has been encumbered and sent over to the U.S. Army or U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for particular upgrades that will be done through a scoping study done in partnership with the U.S. Army Corps. This past Congress has passed a particular start to initiate that study. And so that study will provide the ability for us to provide a specific scope to be able to use those state funds.
Will that help with the river mouth
It will
issue?
not, it should not help with that particular issue other than, this is a chronic issue with the sediment is coming down through
Yes.
Waimea Valley. And as it hits the confluence of that longshore current with that particular
Yes.
outflow, that is considered below the highest wash of the highest wave.
Right.
So that's why it's considered, in their HRS 4611.5 and, water of the state of
Yeah,
Hawaii.
I hear you.
Yeah.
But history, I go back a long ways to the county of Kauai, and I know that a long time ago, the county was responsible for moving that sand away. And maybe we did it the wrong way, but we used to take the sand and put it on parks to fill up holes in the park, and people used to come and use it for, which is not legal anymore. However, there may be a way that sediment can be used to help the shoreline along the Waimea area to Kikaha, because it has been washed away because of the boat harbor. So that's a possibility.
Yeah, we would certainly appreciate any legislative.
I think what we need to do is have a discussion with DLNR on that, because that's a good way of partnering with the state to get that sediment out of the way and yet help the residents down the rest of past the boat harbor anyway. But that's something that I think we need to discuss further, and I'd like to encourage that. And just one last thing. You guys are matching the CIP funds, right, for Vidina and Hanapepe?
We will be until the mayor's budget is released, our intention is to have that as considered as part of the budgets present over to the council this upcoming session.
Okay, and how much is that match?
It would be a 50% match, so it'd be $6.5 million.
Okay, just so you know, though, I'm trying to help the Waimea High School with a project, and we have some land issues there with the county owning some of that land, and yeah, so we can talk about that further. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob.
Any other questions? Senator DeCoy.
Thank you, Mike, for being here. With a projected 17% increase in assessed values in fiscal year 24, do you plan on recommending any measures to reduce the tax bills to homeowners?
It has been a topic of conversation between Mayor Kawakami and leadership of the council. We believe that, the conversation about what is right sizing the appropriate tax burden on residents versus non-resident uses needs to be recalibrated. So while the valuations overall may have been, may be seeing this rise, balancing the tax burden appropriately seems to indicate that we should be pushing more of that responsibility on non-residential types of uses.
And then what will Mayor propose to adjust the sunset of the GET
We certainly have been happy with the program thus far as authorized back in 2018. We are putting those funds to use, and although we do know that this pavement that is being put down as part of the repaving program will not last forever. And so whether it be in perpetuity or at least until we can run through all of our roads once, I think that's a conversation that would be helpful to start leading into the sunset date in about 5 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for standing in for Mayor Kawakami, our former colleague. I was pleased to hear the governor speak about the Alice families today regarding the poverty level that so many islanders are on. Do you have, or do the islands know what percentage of the Alice families belong to Kauai or the Big Island?
I do have the data. I don't have it on me, Representative. I do know that it is close to, up to 50% of the distressed families. So I think, that number that is
The
statewide.
state is over 50%. Now,
Is that
maybe
where-
Big Island is worse. I don't know.
I think we are close to that number, from what I understand.
Does that strike a chord with you, Mayor Roth?
The
Yeah, it
counties, the
does.
counties can just send it to the committee and we can distribute it.
Yeah, and I think we're actually leading the way with Alice, unfortunately. We have the highest Alice numbers, I think, in the states, what I'm being told.
The numbers are embarrassing. And why I focus on that, because the governor mentioned it, but you've got Barking Sands, you got the Pacific Missile Range. Is that still a hub of employment? Or is there anything you can do to get those high-paying jobs? Space Force, et cetera. Could you give us an update on that?
Yeah, it is something that, as Mayor Roth had mentioned in his presentation before you, that while we have the jobs available, the skill level is what is starting to become an impediment in being able to fully recruit for those positions that are open. So while we do have the ability to attract programs like the Space Force to send their, I guess, I don't know if you call it an air wing or because they don't really, well, okay, but whatever their squadron is called. That has been somewhat of a challenge as expressed in consultations with PMRF leadership and with those that are with the Space Force. So we understand that part of our job again is trying to meet the other livable aspects of the spectrum to be able to keep and retain those jobs on island.
So it's not been an economic driver. It's not a growth engine. Or let's say it's reached its and plateaued.
Well, it's again a number of factors that while the location and the proximity to the existing missile range is attractive, we are not going to be able to hold on to those opportunities if we're not able to have housing or having the level of education that many of these professionals do expect as part of their livable calculations.
Thank you, and give regards to Mayor Kawakami, please. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Senator Keith Agaran.
I don't really need to answer these questions, but if you could provide the committee with sort of an update on the previous subsidies that were provided to you for CIP, and make sure that you've used the money. I think specifically I'm more interested in the water projects from must have been FY19, FY20, I think. And that included the Kalaheo, Lawai, Omao, the Kilauea water system, and Waimea Kekaha.
Okay.
And I hope that that's going towards helping you put in the housing that's needed.
Okay, we'll do that, Vice Chair. I can make one comment that I know previously there was a discussion on red tape, and there was one particular appropriation that ended up having to be lapsed as a consequence of a Supreme Court ruling. So our pretty much our Lihue Basin that was partially funded by the legislature for water expansion of our system to provide essentially our multifamily units that were slated for construction as part of a private development. That particular water system was actually not being able to be upgraded because of Supreme Court decision relating to 343.
Okay, thank you.
From the House. Anyone else from the Senate? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Maui no Ka'oi.
Hello, Mike Ako, Chair Pela Cruz,
Aloha.
Vice Chair Keith Agaran, members of the Senate Committee on Ways and Means, Chair Yamashita, Vice Chair Kitagawa, and members of the House Committee of Finance. I wanted to introduce some people that are with me. Scott Tawia is our Director of Finance. Loxie Abraham is our liaison to the legislature. And I also have Mahina Martin, Director of Communications and Public Affairs with me. Also here from the Maui County Council is Chair Tasha Kama, Council Member Yukile Sugimura was here earlier as well. My administration has identified 4 priorities that present the greatest challenges for our residents on Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. These priorities include water, housing, infrastructure, and economic resiliency and diversity, and the social, economic, and environmental impact they have on our community. While our administration is in its 10th day today, I spent the past year conducting 19 community workshops to listen and collect community feedback from residents on each of our islands. Through hundreds of discussions with community members, my team has compiled data and input from our residents regarding challenges in living and thriving in Maui County. It is my intention to continue listening to our community's needs and utilize this feedback in making critical decisions in the best interest of our residents. Our number 1 priority is water. Goal is to balance our water resources with the needs of our growing community. Our objectives are to develop new sources and allocate and deliver current water resources, to continue to provide community forums to collect feedback on our water concerns and our potential solutions, to support wastewater reuse projects, to support water use for sustainable agricultural projects, and to support legislation that prioritizes balanced water protection for our community. Our second priority is housing, and our goal is to increase affordable housing options for local families. An alarming increase of households in Hawaii are falling into poverty levels. The Alice percentage that was mentioned earlier is 52% for the county of Maui. And that's for individuals and families who are identified in that acronym. And these are the people that are struggling in numbers, as each of you know, in your communities. For our particular administration, when we talk about housing, we talk about kama'aina housing. And I just wanted to say this to this panel, that when you say the word affordable housing, your focus is on the price of the home. When you say the word kama'aina housing, your focus is on who lives in that home, who's getting to live in that home. And that's a focus that we are going to try, which we have made a priority, and which we intend to continue to just talk about. This is a tremendous need, kama'aina housing, because of the median price of single-family home on Maui is now in excess of $1 million. Our objectives are to prioritize housing for kama'aina families who've demonstrated vested interest and contribution to our community, to support housing for all AMI tiers, and to focus saving our middle class. To strengthen and seek collaborative and innovative opportunities that provide working class families with affordable housing options. Our third priority is infrastructure. Our goal is to increase, leverage, and maintain infrastructure needs to support housing, education, and transportation challenges. The objectives are to support, leverage funding, prioritize infrastructure projects that align with our growing communities, that contribute to building more homes, the school sites and districts with growing populations, broadband expansion, and support safer and healthier transportation options and roadways for our public. We have several projects that if you would like to ask about, I'm happy to try to answer. Our fourth priority is economic resiliency and diversity, which is to build and diversify and strengthen our economic capacity and support the success of our local businesses. The objective is to diversify our economic drivers through innovation, sustainable living resources, seek opportunities, and the resources that will continue to aid in the economic recovery from the impacts of the recent pandemic, to strengthen our capacity to withstand and respond to adverse and unforeseen conditions that could also negatively impact our economy. I look forward to working with our new council, our directors over the next 4 years, and especially this body in discussing the priorities to Maui Nui. I firmly believe that together we can offer our citizens and our families the future they deserve. And I'm available for questions, although so is Mitch and so is Mike, so they can help. They can help answer questions.
Okay, thank you. Members, we'll open to questions. Any questions? Senator Decoy. Okay, I'll come back to you. Senator Decoy.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor, for being here today, and I can appreciate the 10 days that you're there. First, thank you for prioritizing water as number one in housing. So my question is, many families in upcountry Maui have asked to subdivide their properties, trying to make sure that their keiki, their mo'opunas have places to live affordably. How within your administration to streamline your permitting process and to make sure that upcountry Maui has adequate water for our kama'aina?
Yeah, so you asked a question that involved the top two priorities for us, water and housing. And those of us from Maui understand the challenges, especially for upcountry, where I'm going to say two things about and try to answer your question. Many families, longtime Kama'aina families, purchased the properties up there with the intention of buying these large properties so they could subdivide for their families. That was the entire idea. And then to be told that they couldn't get a water meter, therefore couldn't subdivide, has been something I've heard a lot during the campaign from different communities, upcountry communities. That's one of the reasons I made water our priority. I didn't make it our priority, it's a priority. I mean, anybody can see that. I think that the developing of new sources is what's key for us. When people build new housing projects on Maui, especially upcountry, the developers have brought the water with them. They've developed the water source and therefore have been approved the permits in some of those instances. And so sometimes local families will see this and wonder, how come I don't have a water meter and this person, there's a whole subdivision that's being built, not far from me. And again, it's because of that reason. So the idea is the county should be doing the same thing, looking for water where we can find it. It's not that we don't have water in Maui, it's that the water is in one location and the people live in another location. So what we've done for years is transmit water from one part of the island to the other part. That's proving to be more and more difficult for lots of reasons, legal challenges, doing what's right for our community. So what we need to do is try to find the water where our people live, where there's either drought or where people choose to live. So my goal in our administration is to seek more water resources. There is money that's been put in the federal infrastructure bill. One of the areas is developing water. And I'm hoping that our administration can try to justify the need and the readiness to request those funds so that we can try to develop sources so that our local families can stay and develop those properties for their families.
And then following up on the emergency proclamation on access tier that we have continued to roll for the past just about 2 years. With the emergency proclamation out there and the state putting funds behind equipment, manpower, and traps, where are we on the population herd in Maui, and what role county look at taking in making sure we work collaboratively to bring those populations down for the safety, health, and well-being, not just of our people, but of the access tier itself?
In the county of Maui, the numbers that were given to me by people who know more than I know about this area is anywhere from 60 to 70,000 head of deer. A manageable herd is 20,000. So you can draw the conclusion yourself as to where we're at. We know that this impacts not only our farmers when their crop that they've grown all year can be wiped out in one night by a herd. We know it affects our ranchers who have no grazing land for their cattle because what was grazing land has been taken by the herds. We know it impacts our drivers, people on our roads. I think there were 171 reported accidents in 2021. We know that it impacts people who are not able to fence their property, and it can obviously affect just resident homes. We know that the population, the deer, they're looking for water, they're looking for food, and they're doing what deer do, right? That's what they do. One of the things that we talk about is creating an industry for this game. One of the things, the two things we lack is having an ability to process this meat. So there's I know maybe it's just something the legislature can help with, and maybe we need to talk to the governor and the Department of Health. The USDA has a standard of how to take an animal, what's the correct standard. But the Department of Health, the state can set their own parameters as well. So where the game is shot and how quick you need to process it before it can be put out to market, for example. So in the case of access deer, unlike cattle and unlike hogs, you cannot really take them to slaughter. You got to bring the slaughterhouse to them, which is why we have mobile slaughterhouses. And I'm sure there's at least one on each of our 3 islands, Molokai, Lanai, and Maui. We need more of those because that's what you got to do. You got to take the slaughterhouse to the game, shoot them in the field. They got to have a USDA inspector inspect the kill and make sure it was a clean shot so that you can process it and market it. It's happening now. It is happening now at a small level, but we need to increase that, scale that up. So we need, again, more people to work in this industry of processing, marketing, distributing this meat. It's obviously those of you who've eaten deer meat would know for yourself, but it's healthy. It's viable, and it's an industry. So we should turn this into something, not just getting the herd down. One of the things that happened a few months ago is I used the word exterminate, and the word to the part we were talking about was in our watersheds. We cannot afford to have this game in our watersheds to the point where they destroy that, because we've already decided that's our number one priority, so not to have that happen. And that's why this introduced animal is having an impact in other parts of our island that nobody could have foreseen when it was introduced. So I'm happy that we have the emergency proclamation. I don't know if it goes far enough, because again, the idea is not to just take the game out from where it doesn't belong, but to turn it into a viable product and business for our community.
Thank you for that, Mayor, because right at the present stage, we are trying to make an industry out of it.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy to hear that those are your thoughts
right.
within utilizing the animal itself to make something good out of it. So appreciate that. And is there legislation that you're looking at on your behalf coming to the state?
Yeah, I will say that Mayor Roth reached out to me to ask that same question early on. And now that we're starting to put our staff together, I do have someone who's going to be in touch from Maui County to put in. But so far, we agree with the package that has been put forth.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Chair. And mahalo, Mayor Bisin and your cabinet and my fellow council members back there, Yuki Mura and Chair Tasha Kama for being here. So first off, I appreciate you. I like your top 3 goals, priorities, and any discussion in your cabinet about affordable in perpetuity?
Yes.
So, okay. And if you can elaborate then, thank you.
Well, there was a discussion that was put forth. I think it's already been mentioned in the council through council member who's currently on there has put something there. There might be so I'm answering your question, yes, on the definition of perpetuity. Some of the numbers I think we gotta maybe arrive at. So I'm not ready to discuss the particulars of that. But the concept, the idea is absolutely we're in favor of.
Okay, that's great to hear. And then your thoughts on supporting or not supporting on the extension of the Lahaina bypass heading north?
Absolutely supporting.
Awesome. I'm so happy to hear you say those words right now.
It's at least in the top two, let me just say so. I also had a discussion with Ed Sniffen on a couple of occasions, and that's something that's obviously has already started, the bypass, so we should obviously continue it. We also have the North-South Collector Road in South Maui that has been on the books for, I think, I don't want to exaggerate, but maybe 20 years or so. And that's something that's also, I sent a letter to each of you if you got it. Sorry, we sent it out last night, but in there we talk about the ingress and the egress to both South Maui and West Maui are deeply impacted by our roads. And so having the ability, especially during fires, floods, of course, disasters, natural disasters can affect that, high tide, for example, out on the west side. And so we recognize that those are critical, which is why I think the North-South Collector Road has been on the books longer. So just out of fairness, I would think you'd go with that project. But again, I haven't done a deep dive in comparing them. But of course, West Maui is very interested in that bypass as well. So there are a few other projects through the Waiale and others, but since you mentioned those are probably the top two.
Thank you very much. And one last topic, Chair.
Please.
Thank you. Senator McKelvey and myself had a brief discussion with Chair Kama earlier about the homeless situation by Cut Mountain and that little triangle space where the old road merges with the bypass. Ideas, thoughts, or plans for that portion?
So I was at the West Maui Taxpayers Association. This seems like a long time ago, but I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago. But it was, there were a few ideas from the community about how we can maybe turn that into a managed encampment area because it's already being used. It's out of the way. You can't see it as obvious as other places. The big issue was removing a lot of the cars that are abandoned. Once somebody leaves one, everybody thinks, okay, I can leave mine, and then it ends up becoming a junkyard. So I need to get up to speed on the county's options as to where we can take abandoned vehicles or who we charge that to. But that was a recommendation, one of the suggestions that came out of the West Maui citizens. So an option. I don't think it's the only one, but it's one that was talked about.
Okay, again, thank you for your folks' time to come here today and appreciate all the work you folks are starting to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions, member Representative Favela? Senator Favela, sorry.
Mayor, congratulations. I just have a couple of concerns. I have family on Maui and ever since HCDS I closed down, the lands that have been purchased by, I guess, a Canadian company to do farming. I went to Paia and all I seen was dust. It was a big dust bowl going on. But what the residents of Maui is concerned is that what's going to happen to the land, and I hopefully that you be there about 8 years so you can stop them. Because what they're looking at is that the guys are going to say that we try to plant and try to grow farm industry, but we cannot now. So we want to subdivide the land and build houses on those empty dust bowls that they're not trying to put farming on them. Very little, couple papaya trees here and there, but they're not really farming the whole land. And they cannot say that about water because I know they have water. So the community in that area is worrying that they're going to come later on and say, we tried to do the farming industry, but now later on, since we cannot do them, that they're going to try to put in for subdivision and housing. I just want to see going forward that you can let the people of Maui know and my family that they will never be able to do something like that because ag should stay ag. And if they cannot do them, they shouldn't have bought the land. They should just let somebody else have it. But it's a big dust bowl, and I think it's a health hazard, and I think they should be liable for anybody that have any asthmatic and any respiratory problems because it is. I couldn't even see the road. That's how bad it was. We had to actually stop and let the dust pass. So we thought it was the deer but it wasn't no deer, it was just wind. So if you can look into that and please preserve the ag land. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Is there any question? Mayor.
Yes.
On the deer issue, the Department of Health issue is technically a AG issue where they're just kind of worried about liability. There is a new AG in town, so we can run it by them again and see what is, because my understanding is the exemptions that everybody is looking for are being done in other states. But
It's the location of the shot. It's the location of where the shot is.
yeah, well, you're talking about the slaughterhouses, the mobile slaughterhouses.
No, what I was talking about on the Department of Health is they require that it be a headshot, where the USDA allows it to be shoulder shot.
No, I think they that's clear. I think what they're also looking at is if they can donate it to other people, and Department of Health is kind of the block on that. And because you're talking about other uses, creating the industry.
I wanted to clear up what I was meaning earlier is that the USDA has a standard across the country where the shot has to be taken on the animal, or where the shot has to be located, where the state Department of Health has a more narrow requirement. And that is why that does have an impact on the use of the animal.
Well, what I was getting at is I think my understanding is that it comes down to liability. Sure. And if we are not successful in coming up with something that is palatable for this administration, will the county be willing to take on some of that liability if that's the case?
Based on my former occupation, I would need to ask our Corporation Counsel for their opinion on that, Representative. I think there are many uses for an animal. If it can't be used for market, one of the things that avid hunters do is they do use deer that can't be sold or given away for dog food. And that's actually an industry, and that's actually the #1 expense at our animal shelter that we have on Maui. Their #1 monthly expense is dog food. So there are places for a win-win that we could use without having to decide who has the liability to make use of it. You can't give it to the food bank. You can't give it, to a homeless shelter or somewhere like that. If you can't eat it at your house, you shouldn't give it to somebody else to eat at their house. But the point of it is it can still be used for other uses. We want to try to get it for its highest possible use if we can. And that involves the slaughterhouse, that involves the location of the shot, and that involves the processing. But it can be used even if it can't be taken to market.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay. Senator Decoy.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Mayor, thank you. One more question. I've been asked, and I want to know what's your thoughts on using suppressors for hunting.
So, a suppressor doesn't make the shot any safer. It just makes it quieter. I don't know if that's what we're going for. What that tells me is somebody wants to shoot in a residential area. Like, for example, Keopulani Park, the deer are starting to show up there, and there's discussion about should they try to dispatch the animals where people go walking early in the morning, or it's a residential neighborhood. What I would recommend, so I wouldn't be in favor of a suppressor in that situation, but there are high caliber pellet guns that hunters, especially those who do eradication hunts, use because they're designed for this purpose to be shot in certain areas. I know you're going to hear a lot from bow hunters that also. This is still a sport for a lot of people, and there's an avid and a large community of people out there. So I want to make sure people are clear that I'm not saying to eradicate all of our animals. When it comes to near the airports and when it comes to the watersheds, we have to be extra, I think, vigilant about how we prevent other hazards. But I think if the purpose of using a suppressor so somebody can shoot somewhere where people can't hear, I don't think that's just off the top of my head, I don't think that's a good idea. When the shot happens, people are aware that they're in a hunting area and, they take certain safety precautions.
Mayor, appreciate that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Chair, and Mayor Bisson. So I'm just following up on Keawe Street. Part of it, the upper part where the bypass is state, and then down below where you got to turn off from Walgreens and Foodland Farms and all that ends up being county. And this road has been so dangerous. And now we got two other projects. One is already open, letting out onto that roadway with no signalizing lighting, which I was told the developer had already given to the county. And I just wondering where is that at and what's happening? Because that roadway it's very dangerous with all the housing projects on the road and people trying to cross with no signals or anything of that sort.
Yeah, again, West Maui Taxpayers Association has brought this issue up as well. I didn't know until what you just told me now about there being some agreement with the developer. So I'll make sure that our staff, that we look into that. I didn't know about that, but it is recognized as an area that is, can be dangerous. I think some of the suggestions made were better signage, before you even get closer to the road, so you knew which lane to go in, because a lot of people try to switch lanes as they get closer. People start to slow down when they don't know it's a through lane. So signage was one of the things talked about, but of course a redesign, I don't know what that would require. But if there's some developer that's already put a plan out and it's at the county, try to find it.
Yeah, a follow-up, Chair. And your Public Works Department is familiar,
Okay.
Mr. Molina in your Public Works Department. And we had this brief discussion when I had first met you, and this is to follow up on the Department of Environmental Management investigation that had been started, I think, with the previous administration. Where is that at? Is it continuing? Has there been any types of outcomes with that?
Not that I'm aware.
Okay.
It's continued, yes. No, I'm not aware of any outcome, so I don't know if it's still under investigation. I know when you asked me the question, I posed to you some reasons why it might not have come out yet, without getting into any specifics. And I think you had told me that there was some movement on it. You had heard something had happened, and that sure enough, there was an investigation going on. It was just being done the way investigations are done, where, until they're completed, they don't usually come out.
All right. Well, again, thank you for your time, everyone's time for coming. Mahalo, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any further questions? Okay, Mayor, I just have one more.
Yes,
So
sir.
there's going to be a bill that is going to give Maui, it's going to give the counties the opportunity to opt in. Maui County was the only one that didn't opt in on the 0.5% for the GET.
Yes.
This bill will allow you to do it if you implement before the end of this year for starting January 1st on 2024, and then sunsetting with the rest of it in 2030. It only can be used in this version for housing infrastructure, for water, for sewer, and specifically that seems, since it is a high priority for everyone.
Yes.
It'll allow the current counties to opt in on that also. My assumption is the city and county is dedicated to rail, but the County of Kauai and the Big Island has that option to opt in on that. If that is floated, will you support?
Yes.
Okay.
That was mentioned to me as well. One of the things that was talked about. And I have also been in favor of the county to help with getting locals into homes. Was for the county to put in the infrastructure. So this actually aligns with what we were wanting to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're done. Okay, that concludes our hearing. We would like to thank you for coming in, and we are adjourned.